First, let me address this. I thought it was a good idea. Well, I was wrong. Hello and welcome to Wine and Crime. This is a place where we sit down on our lazy asses on the floor, drink some wine, and talk about some crime. Today, I'm here to tell you about a man who had tons of babies, a criminal mastermind, a disgusting person. There is an HBO documentary about him called Dr. God or something. It's insane. Why do you think it's a primal instinct in men to want to repopulate Earth? It just sounds kind of weird. Like when I hear guys talk about like, I'm gonna give you my baby, I'm gonna impregnate you. Well, I don't think it's hot. I think it's weird. I don't get it. What are you doing? It's like caveman vibes. Why do you want so much responsibility? Okay, TMI, but one time someone came over. I just met them a couple hours before. I know I made great life choices. We were doing the dirty, and out of the blue, he just said, let's make a baby. And I was like, what? I said something along the lines of, I don't want to have a baby right now, because I was caught so off guard. But keep in mind, we were in the middle of doing it at this point. And then he replied, but we would have such beautiful babies. And I don't know what I said after that. I just remember thinking, okay. I've been with some weird Asian men before, but this takes the crown. But back to the story. I do think that it's more common amongst men to want to repopulate Earth, which again is very caveman-like. I never hear women saying, oh, I want to have 1,000,000 babies. But randomly, I would just meet dudes who are like, yeah, I want to have tons of babies. I don't mind having like 20 baby mamas. And today, we are talking about a man who has done it all. This takes place in Las Vegas in the 60s, and it kind of ends in the current time. There was a woman named Katie, and she was living in Vegas at the time, and it wasn't that poppin', it wasn't that populated and crazy crowded, glittery. Basically, it wasn't as busy as it is right now. She was young, and what do you do in the 60s when you're young? You got married, you have children, and you live that lifestyle. So she got married in her 20s, and she started trying to conceive. Everyone around her was already married, already popping out kids, and she felt this immense pressure to have children. But she couldn't conceive, so she decided to go to a doctor, a professional who could actually help her. So she walked into the women's hospital in Las Vegas, and actually at that time, this was only one of the few hospitals that were specifically garnered towards women in Las Vegas at that time. She met a fertility specialist named Dr. Fortier. She had a couple appointments with him, and he said, alright, here is what you're gonna do. You will bring me a vial of your husband's juice. And I'm gonna get this long ass needle and put it inside of you. I know it sounds weird when I explain it like this, but it actually did go like that, and I believe it still does. I sound really stupid right now. Okay, correct me in the comments below. And maybe that needle was long enough, because Katie immediately got pregnant, and she was so excited. She gave birth to a little girl named Wendy, and she actually grew up to be a brilliant person. By the age of 19, she joined the police force, and she became a police officer, then a detective, And then she retired as a captain of the police force in 13 years. Her parents constantly told her, "We don't know where you got these brains from, because, they're both average, but you're something else. They must have raised you right." So when they retired, she was living in Portland, Oregon at that time. And she was thinking, "I've got so much time on my hands now that I'm retired. What do I do with this time? Well, I'm gonna take a 23andMe and go to ancestry.com. So she did exactly that. And that's when she saw that her family tree was massive. She saw a ton of people that said that they were her cousins. But she never knew that she had any cousins growing up. And there were also a lot of half-siblings. And this was very strange because she knew that her parents had difficulty and a struggle with fertility, and so she was an only child. And even she was a miracle baby. And then her dad was not listed as her dad, but a Quincy Fortier. And all of her cousins' names had Fortier in them. So she called up her mom in Vegas and she said, "Mom, you better explain to me why my dad is no longer my dad, while my dad is your fertility doctor." Her mom was so shocked. She was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And she had no idea what actually happened. So one day, being the detective that she was, she decided to reach out to a bunch of people who she saw in her massive family tree. She sent them emails saying, "If you're open for a talk, then let's do it because something fishy is going on." Dr. Quincy Fortier had children all the way from the 40s to the 80s. The oldest was like 70 years old and the youngest was like 20 years old. He died in 2006, but he had children all the way to his 70s. And he had a family of his own too. So one day, so she actually went and met up with one of them, and they were actually interviewed for the HBO documentary too. They said that in the 60s, the female population was about 60% in Vegas, so there was a massive need for gynecologists. And there were not a lot in Vegas, so a bunch of these gynecologists got together and opened up a hospital called the Women's Hospital. Very straightforward. And this was around the time when Las Vegas was relatively suburban, so there wasn't as much glam, but more family households. And a lot of them tried to get pregnant, they were popping out babies, and Dr. Frontier was the head of this hospital. He was an infertility specialist, and for some magical reason, he had miracles happen in his infertility clinic. He was just good at getting women pregnant, and that's what they came here for. Dr. Quincy Frontier was actually married to a woman for a big chunk of his career who had a daughter from a former marriage, which will be important later on, so keep that in mind. They moved in together and they have 5 more children. The kids were interviewed for the documentary as well, and they said that he was a smart man. So he was helping this woman get pregnant by putting his juice in the syringe. So the kids grew up knowing that they probably have hundreds of half siblings out there, but they couldn't really do anything about it. There was a man in Southern California and his mom moved into a new neighborhood, a new apartment, and she was talking to the neighbor, and she was like, yeah, I was in Vegas at one point, I had my son there, blah 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 blah. And the neighbor knew about the rumor, so they immediately told the mom about it, and she quickly called the son. Okay, hey, you gotta take, like right now, you gotta take a DNA test. So he took the test, and it turns out that the doctor was his father. And a lot of the offsprings who found out through DNA tests were just afraid to tell their parents, because if you just think about it, just imagine you take a DNA test and now you gotta tell your 80-year-old dad that, okay, hey dad, you know, what's up, it's so great, but you know, I have something to tell you, yeah, you are not my father. So Randy got in touch with all these people, and then he went back to Vegas and he looked for any files, any reports of someone making a complaint, just something on record that something did happen, because at this point, remember, Dr. Frontier had already died. And she did find the report, and it was from this 20-something-year-old woman filing a complaint when he was in his late 60s, and he was saying to the judge that he mixed his juice with the husband's juice because he wanted the husband's juice to swim faster, because it wasn't, but his was. So they settled out of court, and I don't know how much he got, but they did settle. And then Wendy found out about another woman who actually had gone to Dr. Frontier because she had an infection, and he was supposed to treat her infection, and that was it. She actually had plans to go to college after this, and she had her whole life ahead of her. And turns out, she got pregnant. And she got really confused by this, because she freaking knew that she was protecting herself carefully. So now it goes from, oh, this was just like a kind man who wanted to help these families who couldn't conceive, to, okay, maybe he was just a sick Jack who just wanted a million children. And then more news came forward. So the reason why he got a divorce with his first wife, and by the way, she took all the kids with her, because the wife's daughter from, the former marriage, complained to her mom that, whenever she didn't feel good, she was feeling sick, maybe she had her stomach was hurting, she would tell his dad, Dr. Frontier, the doctor that he was, he would be like, okay, let me help you. Let me treat your stomachache. Now strip. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't remember the last time that my tummy was hurting, and someone just told me, okay, you stripped I'm naked. And surprise, surprise, when she was 17 years old, she got pregnant. And this was very confusing for the whole family. Solely because she's never done it before. He decided to send her away to a house where they had unwed moms, and her son was gonna get adopted. So she carried the term, the baby was born, and he got adopted. But after that, the mom picked up the kids and they left. And it seems like all the kids were abused, because later on a son in an interview said that, you know, the HBO show, the little documentary, so the son said that the safest that he had ever felt around his father when he was standing over him, looking at his coffin. After many years, the stepdaughter, realized what had happened to her, and she went back to Dr. Frontier, and she said, "You don't even realize what this has done to me. You don't even realize what an impact it had on my life. He literally ruined my life." And then the answer he gave to her was that, there was this medical study done when a dad has relations with his stepdaughter, nothing traumatizing or negative can come out of it. Eventually, when his son turned 27 years old, he started looking for his mum, and she did find Connie. Connie is, the stepdaughter, and they started talking. She told him the whole story about how he was conceived. And then John actually went to see, and John, is the grandson, the stepdaughter's son. He actually went to see Dr. Frontier at his practice, and then he said that it was such a weird feeling because he was looking at this man and he knew that he was his father, but he was putting on this whole show. He lied to John, and he said that, Connie was just getting this exam and he accidentally swapped his right swab and this another swab with some juice in it, and that's how it happened. I think it's just one of those situations when he wants to have a lot of offsprings because that's what makes him manly. That, he thinks that he is superior somehow, so he wants to spread his DNA around. He needs to reproduce, and he doesn't want anything to do with this kid, so it's not like he wanted to have a relationship with, John or whoever, whatever. He just, wanted to spread his seeds. So when they started digging deeper, she went through this whole thing, and to this day we have no idea how many children are there out there exactly and what his motive was. He said that for the longest time it tore her apart because as a detective, her number one priority was to protect children, was to protect people, and now to find out that her biological father was a monster. It's just... But she said that thankfully by the time that, she did this DNA test, her father, the father that raised her, not the biological father, but the one that raised her, had already passed. So thankfully he didn't have to go through all this trauma. Well, listen to this. Right now, there are over 2,000 gynecologists that are currently being sued for malpractice, basically, but to be precise, for using their juice. I hate saying this word, but you know what I mean. So for using their juice instead of the right one. So they are getting sued for it right now. So what do you think about it? Personally, I'm not planning to have a child in the near future, but if I ever do, I have PCOS. So if I ever want to carry a child of my own, I will probably have to use the same method, if not something similar. And considering this case, it just makes me a bit uneasy. Okay, I've been sitting here for so long that it got dark. So I'm sorry, but okay, let me know if you have any recommendations or stories you would like me to cover. And if you like this story, then check out my other videos. I don't know how to put videos here, but click on my channel and you can find them there. And okay, see you next time. Bye.